Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can all speak English. Unfortunately, I'm Scottish, so this morning the accent may be difficult for you. I will speak slowly and hopefully you can understand what I say. Okay, bear with me while we find the presentation. We have a glamorous assistant somewhere in the audience, I believe. This one. Perfect. Okay, UEFA, or UEFA as it's often called, is based in Nyon in Geneva in Switzerland. This is where I work. UEFA, for those who don't know, are responsible for European football, for organising matches such as the Champions League, Europa League, and of course some international matches. That's UEFA's responsibility. It's an amalgam of all the football associations and federations throughout Europe. I think it's something like 52, 53 countries are members of UEFA. My role is a UEFA security officer, and within that role it's my job to attend high-risk football matches where we have risk assessed. We risk assess every match at UEFA, and if we risk assess a match as potential to have violence or pyrotechnics or pitch invasions, then they will always send a security officer to that match. Also, high-profile matches. A high-profile match is, for example, the Champions League semi-finals, the finals of the Champions League. These are high-profile matches watched throughout the world by literally billions of people. I was in Brazil in December, and it was interesting to see that Brazil stopped to watch European football matches. Everyone in Brazil was watching television, so the matches are worldwide global events. So when your local teams are involved in UEFA football matches, believe me, people in Australia, Brazil, America, Japan are sitting down to watch these football matches. Global events, and they reflect on your country because people are watching your country live on television. Okay, so my job is to go to these football matches, the high risk and high profile matches throughout Europe, and to critically examine the safety and security concept that's applied. So there is a document which UEFA publish, which every club has to apply to a UEFA football match, and it's my job to go and look and make sure that the rules and regulations of UEFA are being applied properly so we have a safe and secure event. I've also been responsible for other events such as last year's Champions League final at Wembley. I was responsible for the security at Wembley, and also in 2012 the UEFA Championship in Poland and Ukraine. I was responsible for putting the Ukraine side of the security together. I'm a former United Kingdom police commander. I'm also a former national security advisor for the Scottish Football Association, and I have worked with UEFA since 2007. Today, I want to explain to you how UEFA looks to create a safe, secure and welcoming environment for everyone attending a UEFA football match. A large part of the safety concept is taken from the UK model that was introduced after the disasters we had at Ibrox, Bradford, Hillsborough and of course Heysel in Belgium, where many, many people lost their lives simply because of bad planning, bad safety, bad security, bad planning, and people died as a result of that. Completely unacceptable. The basic philosophy of the model that we use to create a safe environment is a stadium fit for purpose. The basics of the philosophy is a stadium fit for purpose and an integrated safety management regime. And I see the police are here today from Belgrade. Absolutely essential that the police and the safety regime work together, not as two separate entities, they work together. The challenges, if we look at Poland and Ukraine, the 2012 championship, people said they could never host an event in Poland and Ukraine safely. It would be a disaster. There'd be fighting, the football would be unsafe, it would be a difficult event for people to travel to and safely go to football. I think Poland and Ukraine in 2012 was perhaps one of the most successful Euro Championships we've ever had, and it showed that if they apply this model and apply it correctly, we can host very safe events. What we did with Poland and Ukraine prior, 2 years before the event, we went to Poland and Ukraine and we worked with the Polish Federation and the Ukrainian Federation, and we taught them on the model, which I will show you this morning. We showed them how to apply this model to their football, and it took a fantastic amount of work by a lot of very committed people, but eventually they achieved it. In the UK, we saw the success from the 80s and the 90s when we had violence in the UK to where UK football is now, a very safe and enjoyable thing to attend, and Poland and Ukraine have further proven that it can be done. So looking at Serbia, where there are still problems at some of your football matches, this is the model to take forward, and not just Serbia, other countries that still have that problem in football. This is the model to take forward. It's a very simple model on one level, very simple. On another level, it's very complex. This morning I'm trying to give the simple model because we don't have a lot of time, so I'll go through this quite quickly. And hopefully we can get a basic understanding of how UEFA creates a safe, secure and a welcoming environment for all target groups attending football matches. It's critical to ensure that stadia only accommodate the number of spectators which it is safe to do so. Now, this model that I will give this morning, while it deals mainly with football, it can also be applied to all other events. All other events can have this same basic model applied to them. There's a document which is online which I would highly recommend, and this is a UK document, which is what we base a lot of our security on. Okay, the two main issues that we look at for any football stadium is the physical infrastructure of that stadium and the safety management at the stadium. Two separate entities, but two separate entities that must work in harmony to create a safe event. This part here I put to people in a responsible position because you are part of that safety culture, because too often people in discharging its responsibilities say, well, we have rules and regulations and I apply those rules and regulations, but in actual fact it's not just applying the rules and regulations, it's actually believing in those rules and regulations and applying them with passion, understanding them and actually creating a safety culture within a sports ground, and that's absolutely essential. And it's also something in the UK that's written into legislation. The previous speaker spoke about in the UK it's perhaps simpler because we're more respectful of authority. Well, the only way we get that authority, that respect for authority, is when we give a sensible and workable ideal, and that's very much what we look for, is the people with management responsibility to promote a safety culture. Okay, you'll hear a lot of this morning. Calculation of a safe stadium capacity, the P factor, which is the physical infrastructure of a stadium, and the S factor, safety management. The two of them must work together, P and S factors, and it's absolutely critical to everything we do. The most important factor in stadium management is the maximum safe capacity of that stadium. It dictates the maximum number of people to be allowed into the stadium during an event and for each sector of the stadium. Often I go to football matches throughout Europe, and when I ask what the capacity of the stadium is, they will tell me how many seats they have. So they will simply say 50,000 because they have 50,000 seats. So do we just accept that? Do we immediately sell 50,000 tickets and let 50,000 people in when the stadium is inherently unsafe, when perhaps it's above 30,000? 30,000 is perhaps the limit of that stadium, albeit it's got 50,000 seats. So we look at the maximum safe capacity of a stadium. So how do we calculate the maximum safe capacity? 4 factors, 4 initial factors. We determine the entry capacity into the stadium, we determine the holding capacity of the stadium, the exit capacity and the emergency evacuation capacity. Now that's 4 numbers that we must come up with for every stadium that hosts a UEFA match. And this can be applied to every stadium, not just UEFA stadiums. So how do we determine the entry capacity? Well, first of all, we look how many spectators can safely enter into a stadium within 1 hour. And that includes looking at the access routes and turnstile flow rates per hour. How many turnstiles do they have? Now, for people who actually work at football stadiums, they'll understand that generally speaking, you will have, well, I can speak about the National Stadium in Scotland. There's 109 turnstiles enter into the stadium, 109. And we know that there is 660 persons per hour can enter through that turnstile. So that gives us a figure of how many people within an hour we can get into that stadium safely. And this is the type of thing we work on. It's 70, for anybody that's good at maths, 72,000, something like that, could enter that stadium within an hour. Okay, we determine the holding capacity, the number of usable seats. So again, we go back to this figure. Oh, we've got 50,000 seats, so we can take 50,000 people. Well, no, because how many of those seats have obstructed views? How many are broken? How many are below the minimum dimensions? We're quite specific about the dimensions of the seats within a stadium and also the actual structure of them. And the distance between gangways, which is a very important one. We find in older stadiums the distance between the seats and the gangways, the actual passageways, are too narrow. The modern stadiums are wide, the older stadiums are very narrow, and this also has an effect on our holding capacity. The exit capacity of a stadium, the number of spectators who can safely exit the stadium, Sorry about that. The number of spectators who can safely exit a stadium. For example, the Amsterdam Arena hosts 50,000 spectators, and within 10 minutes it can be completely clear. Normally, at the end of a match, from the final whistle to the people leave, 10 minutes. And that's the exit capacity of the Amsterdam Arena. Do you know the exit capacity of the stadium you're responsible for? In the case of an emergency evacuation, when, for whatever reason, we have to evacuate the stadium, then we would expect that people can evacuate the stadium within 8 minutes. So from full to empty within 8 minutes. These are the type of calculations that we make to make it a safe stadium. Of course, the fire strategy comes into emergency evacuations also. Okay, the final capacity then is the lowest figure of 1 to 4. So if we say a stadium has 50,000 seats, but we have broken seats or whatever, then that figure will be reduced. We then also take account of the P factor, the physical condition of the stadium, and the S factor, the safety management of it. And that gives us a final figure. So when it may have 50,000 seats in the stadium, UEFA may dictate that that stadium will only be allowed to hold 40,000 people for whatever reason within the P factor and the S factor. And that's absolutely critical to safety management. Okay, the P and S factor, they're given numerical values. So security officers, when they look at a stadium that's going to host an event, there is a numerical value given to it, and that's from 0 to 1. 1 is 100%. If, for any reason, the stadium and the physical condition of the stadium or the quality of the safety management falls below that, then we again would reduce the number of persons who are permitted into that stadium. Okay, if I look at the P factor, first of all, a nice new modern stadium here, it's terrific control room, and you can see the seating decks within the stands are excellent. Okay, the P factor is the number of spectators that can safely use the stadium. It impacts on the entry, exit and emergency evacuation of that stadium, and the P factor is a key condition for incident prevention and management. Okay, the key elements, the general condition of the venue, the access control systems, safety and security facilities, and welfare facilities. I'll go through these 4 issues in turn. General condition of the stadium, standard of construction, the quality of facilities. Does it have uneven stairs, poorly distributed exits, loose obstacles, etc.? Some stadiums are excellent, ultra-modern. A lot of thought went into the safety of them. Other stadiums are very old, built back in the 1940s and 50s, and are unfit for purpose, and they're still being used. So there's 2 types that we have. General wear and tear of a stadium, the level of maintenance and cleanliness which we insist on, and the temporary condition, of course, of the stadium due to snow, reconstruction works or whatever. If we go to Cardiff, for example, the Super Cup will be in Cardiff in Wales this year, and currently it's under construction to be increased in size, and this is an impact on our whole safety regime for that stadium. Okay, access control systems, as I said, a full capacity of a stadium access within 1 hour. 660 persons should be able to get through a turnstile in 1 hour. 660 persons within 1 hour. Entry access control systems, we prefer turnstiles, the high turnstiles. A counting system, it's essential that the police and the security officer in the stadium are aware of how many people are coming into the stadium, so there should be a counting mechanism there so they know exactly how many are coming in. Obviously, wayfinding and ground regulations are essential. Safety and security facilities, joint control rooms between the police and also the safety officer for the stadium. They should be working together. It should be an integrated approach to safety management. So we need a good modern facility. We need a view of the stadium bowl, CCTV, emergency power, and a risk-based segregation concept, and a fire strategy in safe areas. Okay, seating and welfare, again, we're looking at a nice new modern stadium, fixed individual numbered seats with backrests, fence-free preferably, and I know that can be difficult in some countries, but we look to see a stadium with no fences, no high fences. The concern we always have is Hillsborough. After what happened at Hillsborough, where people were trapped in the stadium at the front behind the fences, and people crushed in from behind, and as people come in from behind, the people at the front near the fence were then crushed against the fence and died. So we always have concerns when we see high fences. They're very dangerous, very, very dangerous. Okay, first aid facilities, toilets, catering, and equal facilities for supporters of visiting teams. Okay, the P factor, getting it wrong, and here we're getting it completely wrong. This is the type of thing that happened at Hillsborough, where we had mass invasions of the stadium and crushing. Inefficient access control systems causes irritation and impatience. Poor confiscation and deposit facilities. A dirty stadium invites sloppy behaviour, not just from the supporters, but from the staff. And as I say, fences we're not keen on. Okay, the P factor is all about the physical condition of the stadium. So we look, and as I said right at the start, how many people can we safely host within that stadium? So look at the physical condition of that stadium, and that's the issues I was giving you there. The S factor is different again. The S factor is the safety management of the stadium. So the P factor is physical, the make-up, the construction of the stadium, and the S factor is the people who work within the stadium and make it safe for everyone. But the two of them come together. Okay. The S factor, we're still getting instances of poor safety management. How often have you seen this at football? Pitch incursions, overcrowding, bad segregation, ticketing issues, and a lack of stewarding and overzealous policing. Unfortunately, the overzealous policing happens because the stewarding operation is so bad, the police have to take control, and that shouldn't happen. The stewarding should be good enough to deal with it, and the police should only become involved in an escalating situation that's agreed between the stadium and the police. But unfortunately, all too often, the stadium lose control and the police have to react, and that's a wrong way to go about dealing with it. Okay, assessing the S factor, five areas that we look at: safety policy, the role of the safety officer, stewarding, safety systems, and spectator accommodation. Okay, the safety policy, details of risk assessments. The previous speaker spoke quite at length on risk assessments. Two types of risk assessments. There's a generic risk assessment, which is the same for every single match you hold at a stadium. always the same, never changes. You know what the risks are at that stadium. However, there will also be ongoing risk assessments because every match is unique. So over and above the generic risk assessments, there should be additional risk assessments for that particular match. Okay, it's essential that club management are involved in policy and they review that policy and the reporting of any changes. Staff obviously have to be trained and they should be very knowledgeable in what they're doing, but spectators also, they have to be educated. We have to let the spectators know what the expectations are. The roles of all staff and management, that should be written down and defined, and also the safety management group for the stadium should consist of the police, fire, medical, city authorities, football association and the club. They should all work together to make a safe event. The safety officer, now we see this as one of the most important roles in the change from how we previously had football matches running to where we are now. The safety officer is taking over the role of what the police commander used to take on. The way we look at this is the safety officer runs the event with the stewards. They are responsible for running a safe event, so they're responsible for all the risk assessments, they're responsible for putting the appropriate staff, for keeping passageways clear, etc. It's the safety officer that does that. The police commander should only become involved if the situation escalates and the police require to take charge. So it's a safety officer that is looking at it as an event. He's looking to have a safe event, and the police only become involved when it escalates. Some clubs still, we go to the safety officer role is not defined enough. So we define what his role is, the functions, responsibilities and power, and the qualifications and training for that person. A very, very important position, and there is a university course where they can actually go through nowadays and attain a qualification on safety management before they are allowed to operate in football stadiums throughout Europe, and this is applied by UEFA. We expect safety officers in all stadiums now, and we expect them all to be qualified at level 4 training. So a very high standard of person we look to. Okay, stewarding. Again, risk assessment with the stewarding companies. How many resources do we actually need? Is there a stewarding plan? What is their specific role within the stadium? The number of trained stewards and supervisors that will be available. The training and assessment of them, and the briefing and code of conduct. All these things are absolutely essential. Any workforce has to understand what its role is, what's required of it. The uniform and equipment, again, we look for them to be very smart. That's why we issue these UEFA bibs. It gives them an importance, and it also makes them recognisable. Familiarity with the event and the venue is clearly important, and the various tasks that they must perform. They must be briefed and in clear, unambiguous language of exactly what the tasks that they will be required to perform are. Okay, safety systems and procedures. Again, this is where we look for everything to be written into an operations manual, and all the checks that are done in the stadium, everything is written down and kept a note of. Medical plans, fire risk plans, traffic management plans, all these things must be written and assessed regularly. Okay, safety systems and procedures, again, we record absolutely everything that happens within that stadium, and contingency plans must be tried and tested, and all too often we see this hasn't been done. Access control systems and communication procedures is another area we find can be weak. Spectator accommodation. If the stadium is clean and welcoming, then people will treat it better than some place which isn't. And that's a proven fact. Okay, I've went through that very quickly. As I say, there's a lot of issues within that clearly would take a lot of time to understand fully. As long as you understand that the P&S factors are the biggest influences on safety and security at football matches. We look at the stadium, how many can safely be accommodated in that stadium, and we reduce the capacity of that stadium depending on the physical and safety regime in place, and that gives us a safe event, and this is how UEFA target football matches. Okay, is there anybody wanting to ask any questions at this time regarding it? No? Okay. Thanks very much.